Hello viewers, welcome to AP's Ophthalmology Pulse. Today we shall discuss the force duction and active force generation tests. The force duction test is a test performed in an incomitant squint to differentiate between a paralytic and restrictive cause of strabismus. You may watch my video on classification of squint from the link above or in the description box. A closely related test is the active force generation test. Whereas the force duction test measures the resistance of the eye to passive rotation, the active force generation test measures the force exerted by muscles during eye movements. The two mainly differ in the executor of the action. In the force duction test, the examiner moves the eyeball in a particular direction and determines the resistance to passive rotation of the globe while the patient is relaxed and providing neither resistance nor resistance to the forced movement created by the examiner. Whereas in the active force generation test, the examiner keeps the eyeballs still and asks the patient to move the eye in the direction of action of the muscle under consideration and tests the resistance felt. Topical anesthesia may be used in adults and cooperative children above 7 to 8 years of age. It may be augmented by placing of cotton pledgets soaked with anesthetic in the area to be grasped. Topical phenylephrine may also be instilled to shrink the conjunctival vessels. In younger children, a general anesthetic is required. Let us understand the force duction test in the context of a long-standing right lateral rectus palsy. You are suspecting a contracture of its direct antagonist, the right medial rectus. If present, this would limit abduction. So we need to passively abduct the eye to test how far we can do so. First, ask the patient to move the eye in the direction of limited movement, in this case to the right. This serves two purposes. The maximum range of voluntary movement can be determined, and the antagonist, in this case the medial rectus, relaxes by Sherrington's law and thus eliminates resistance to passive movement, which can interfere with interpretation. The limbus is now grasped opposite to the direction of movement. So here the medial rectus is grasped with a tooth forceps. Some people prefer to grasp the muscle tendon itself, but this is more traumatic and more painful for the patient. The globe is then passively rotated in the direction of limited motility, taking care not to push it posteriorly, as this can produce a false negative result due to slackening of the recti. If you are not sure whether you are involuntarily pushing the globe down or not, you can even propose it slightly with the forceps. Here you can see that the globe is able to be abducted more than the patient can voluntarily, but not fully, and a resistance to further abduction is felt. This is called a positive force duction test. This is because of medial rectus contracture. This is in contrast to what would have been the situation in the early stages of the lateral rectus palsy prior to medial rectus contracture, where full abduction would have been possible. This is called a negative force duction test. The resistance is felt when the eye is moved in the direction opposite to that in which the mechanical restriction is present. However, sometimes when there is a retro-equatorial adhesion, a reverse leash effect can be seen when there is a restrictive element on the same side as the limitation of movement. To test for lateral rectus contracture when adduction is limited, for superior rectus contracture when infraduction is limited, to test for inferior rectus contracture when supraduction is limited. Alternately, some people use two forceps at opposite meridians perpendicular to the movement limitation. For example, for horizontal restriction, two forceps are used at 12 and 6 o'clock. If the force duction test is positive, one can proceed to the active force generation test. This requires active cooperation of the patient and hence can only be performed in conscious patients. Here, two forceps are used to hold the globe steadily in the primary position. The patient is then instructed to look in the field of action of the muscle to be tested. For example, here the patient is asked to look to the right because we are testing the lateral rectus muscle. A weak or absent tug suggests the presence of a muscle weakness or a paretic component. This force may be compared with that of the other muscles. One can also use the same muscle in the other eye for comparison when in doubt. The active force generation test may be performed either before or after a force duction test. What we have seen till now is FDT for the recti. Guyton described an exaggerated force duction test for the obliques. The patient should be lying down with the examiner performing the test from the head end. First, we'll see how to test for tautness of the superior oblique of the right eye. The globe is grasped at the 3 and 9 o'clock positions in the primary position. The globe is pushed back into the orbit, then extorted, then brought supero-nasally. The globe is then brought temporally when a click will be felt and the tautness can be assessed. Now to test for tautness of the inferior oblique. The globe after retropulsion is intorted, rotated inferonasally and then rocked temporally in this position. Now that we have discussed the procedure, let's have a look at the various indications performing these tests. To differentiate a paretic from restrictive strabismus, I will leave a table of the important causes of restrictive strabismus on the last slide. To determine the presence of a restrictive element which may have developed following a prolonged paralytic squint. To aid in surgical decision planning, the type of surgery and the muscle on which to operate can be better planned based on the results. The force duction test under anesthesia should be preferably performed on all patients having muscle surgery, even when limited rotations have not been seen preoperatively. The force duction test should be performed prior to opening the conjunctiva, during the surgical procedure, and after the conjunctiva has been closed, just prior to completion of surgery. The surgeon can thus estimate whether a restriction has been caused by conjunctiva and Tenon's connective tissue, surrounding scar tissue, a tight muscle, or tightness posteriorly, which can be easily visualized. If the force duction test positive after removal of muscle, it indicates orbital fibrosis. The FDT may be performed at the end of scleral buckling to make sure there is no tissue that is restricted because of the buckle. To determine possible causes of limited mobility after strabismus surgery, example muscle slippage or excessive resection. And finally, the active force generation test may be used to assess strength of an extraocular muscle. Coming to complications, a subconjunctival hemorrhage is extremely frequent, if not universal. A thin conjunctiva may be lacerated. Adequate lubrication can reduce the incidence of corneal abrasions, which are less common but can occur if forceps slips. A syncope as a vasovagal response to muscle traction may occur. Some clinicians use atropine to prevent this problem during the procedure. Probably the only contraindication is a confirmed or suspected open globe injury. Important points to be considered to avoid fallacies in interpretation. It is not helpful if ocular rotations are completely full. It is performed only when there is a limitation of movement. Good patient cooperation is required. If the patient does not voluntarily look in the direction requested, the antagonist muscle may continue to be innervated, causing the examiner to feel resistance, and which does not represent true mechanical restriction. It is necessary to grasp the globe as close to the limbus as possible, where the conjunctiva and Tenon's connective tissue join into one layer. If the globe is held more posteriorly, the conjunctiva may stretch and the force of the forceps will not effectively rotate the globe. If performing under anesthesia, avoid ketamine as it increases muscle tone. Similarly, succinylcholine causes a feeling of resistance on force duction testing, which lasts about 20 to 30 minutes following its administration. So it is suggested that pancuronium, a non-depolarizing muscle relaxant, be used. One must take care not to push the globe posteriorly when testing the recti, as it could give a false negative result. Rapid, unexpected eye movements by the patient may tear the conjunctiva, as it has been gripped firmly with the forceps. This is more frequently encountered in young children who may be anxious and frightened when the test is performed. in the outpatient. So, if the examiner believes the test may be both difficult and invasive, it is preferable to perform the force reduction test under anesthesia prior to surgery. When there is co-contraction of an extraocular muscle, such as Juanis syndrome without contracture, or abnormal innervational patterns such as aberrant third nerve regeneration following palsy, the force reduction test may suggest restriction when none exists. The resistance encountered may be due to the abnormal innervation. Under anesthesia, the force reduction test results are reliable in these conditions. The more frequently this test is used, the more skilled the examiner becomes at feeling and interpreting the results. Hence, postgraduate residents are advised to perform this test as often as possible to become proficient. There are two alternatives to the force reduction and active force generation tests. In the differential IOP test, the IOP is measured in the primary position of gaze and then with the patient attempting to look in the direction of limited mobility. An increase of 6 millimeters or more denotes resistance transmitted to the globe by muscle restriction. This is called the Brazy sign. When the muscle is acting against resistance, more force has to be generated. Along with that, the tight muscle presses on the globe, increasing the intraocular pressure. This test causes less discomfort and is more objective. The other measurement is that of saccadic velocity by means of EOG. In case of paresis, the excursions of the paretic muscle are significantly slow in velocity and also have smaller amplitudes. In contrast, the restrictive squints have normal saccadic velocity till the restriction comes into effect when the excursion stops abruptly. So that's it for today. If you like what you saw, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to never miss an update from AP's Ophthalmology Pulse. You may watch my other videos by clicking on the thumbnails. Please leave a note in the comment section if you wish for any particular topic to be covered in future. Look forward to regular updates. Thank you for watching.